and fascinating stuff.
You also talked a bit about America and what they are doing. It's fascinating what's happening over there.
Give me an update. I can't keep up. What's going on in America at the moment?
Well, of course, Putin is going to Alaska on Friday.
This coming Friday?
Coming Friday, 15th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm. To meet
To meet
Trump.
the dump, yeah.
Well, that's American soil, isn't it?
It is.
Alaska. Technically, they should arrest Putin. He's a war criminal
He is.
in the International Court of Justice. That'd be fun. No.
But they don't agree with that, do they?
I'm not sure who the they is. I mean,
The
you mean the
American-
Trump
The American.
administration, the Trump coup people?
Yeah, the council that.
Yeah. Well, that's a discussion in itself, isn't it? But I imagine they probably won't arrest Putin.
Probably not. But now
and that
there's rumors that maybe Zelensky will be invited.
Well, that would be good.
There'd been a rush meeting in European leaders this weekend. So they do want
Zelensky to
they
be
say, there can't be any negotiations about peace or anything
in Ukraine without him. Well, obviously.
Without.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that would be wonderful if the three of them can go. And if they can agree my Solomon option, freeze the lines, hear my proposal, which I intend to get to them in time. We've got till Friday.
And maybe have a voting session in the occupied territories overlooked by United
Like the Donbass
Nations.
area and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Donbass,
That would be a fair
Zaporizhzhia,
referendum on whether you
Let's
want to
say,
be.
how is this? There was supposedly a vote a couple of years back.
Yeah, it
where
wasn't really a fair vote. Was it?
No.
Well, that would be excellent to have that as part of a peace settlement, peace treaty. I don't think that. I think the truce should happen before that.
Oh,
Once you've got the truce and the freeze, then that could be organised under international monitoring.
Yeah.
Yes, well, that's good. Thanks for that information. I didn't know that was coming up. I didn't know they'd fixed the date for Friday.
They fixed it for Friday, apparently. So
Is it going to be in Anchorage in Alaska somewhere?
probably
Yeah.
the shortest route from Russia to the USA.
I do. I mean, just one personal little thing. So I watched a movie called The Long Way Round, which is a story of a bike trip by two British guys in London, quite famous guys, who both had super bikes, and they motorcycled all the way from London across Europe, across parts of Russia and Ukraine, across Siberia, and all the way through to Alaska. And that last bit, going to Magadan in Siberia, was on what's called the Road of Bones. It's a road that was made by imprisoned Gulag people, under the Soviets, a lot of whom were worked to death, and their bones were then placed in the road to give ballast, because a lot of it's very swampy ground, and they wanted the bones, to help build the road, and so they literally call it the Road of Bones. And these guys, these British explorers, one of whom is, the twin brother of a friend of mine, Daisy Borman, whose father was a film director, a famous film director in Ireland. It's an amazing film if you've not seen it as a biker. And that is the journey through to Alaska from London via Siberia. And it's still pretty wild out there in the wild east,
Yeah, I have a friend, a Norwegian helicopter pilot, actually. He and some friends also went through Russia and Siberia on motorcycles.
Okay.
I've seen some footage and some photos of that.
Yeah, I mean there are parts which the road doesn't work.
There's no road.
There's no road. And they kept getting bogged down, and the bikes would break. And it's a real adventure. It's an epic story they did. And of course you couldn't do that anymore because of the war. And I'd love it that we could go back to doing, bike tourism across the whole of the Northern Hemisphere all the way round and back. But no, let's pray for the success of that, which would be, to me, it's part of this Solomon option. Both Ukraine and Russia have very wise people, philosophers, sages, rabbis, imams. Let's all get behind the Solomon option as an outcome for this tragic war. And, let's stop putting bones into the ground. And instead, let's develop a logic of peace. Okay, talking of which, let's choose one of the 99 names of peace then. Can you give me a number between 53 and 99?
82.
82. Right. So. Oh. Well, this is fascinating. This is to do with Etruscan language, which I've always had great respect for the Etruscans. They lived in the northern part of Italy, what we call now Tuscany, which comes from Etruscan.
Make good wine.
They've always made good wine. And also the Celts in Gaul, here in France, imported Etruscan wine about 1000 BC. Long before Rome was even founded, the Etruscans were trading with Gaul, and the Celts, there's Etruscan pottery, Etruscan metalwork, and Etruscan flagons with wine in some of the Celtic graves in places like Vix and up in the northeastern France, proving that the Gauls and the Etruscans were very close. And that's interesting to me as a Druid, because Etruscan religion was very much like Druidry. And I argue for a close symbiosis going on between the Druids and the Etruscan priests. They were both interested in augury, seeing into the future, seeing into the will of the gods. A lot of the words in Latin to do with religion come from Etruscan. Academics and thinkers in ancient Rome knew this. Claudius, the emperor, was married to an Etruscan woman, and he wrote a whole 4-volume study of Etruscan religion, which unfortunately has been lost. If anyone knows where that book is, please get in touch, because I'd love to see it. So yes, Etruscan, fascinating culture. It was the learned and sacred language of ancient Rome. Inscriptions have been found in northwest and west central Italy, all over Tuscany. And if you go to the Vatican Museum, if you're lucky enough to go, I've been a couple of times, there's a whole floor of Etruscan archaeological finds. They love paintings. In their tombs, they painted their ideal afterlife, which is the family are all half lying down on couches, drinking really good wine in like an after party. And this life is just a momentary thing we have to get through to get to the heavenly party.
Get to the good wine.
Where there's perfect wine which doesn't leave a hangover, just makes you mellow. So, but what is the Etruscan language? Where does it come from? I go into it here in the 99 Names of Peace. And what we do know is the alphabet we use in English is actually a descendant of the Etruscan alphabet. Because the Etruscans were an ancient people when the Romans were just barbarians, sorry to say. And they had a sophisticated culture and a religion, and they adopted the Greek alphabet and formed the Etruscan alphabet. And it was that alphabet which they taught to the Romans. They basically taught the Romans how to write. And so we have a number of words that come from Etruscan. Some of the words are people, from populus, which was of Etruscan origin. Rome itself is an Etruscan word, Roma. Satellite comes from Etruscan. Secular comes from seculus, which was an Etruscan cosmological word meaning a very long period of time. Seculum is like 1,000 years of sacred time, akin to the yugas of Hinduism. Triumph is an Etruscan word. Vernacular is an Etruscan word. Vagina is an Etruscan word, borrowed by the Latins. Month names, April. The word arena, autumn, coming from Etruscan. So I give all these words, and what I'm sad about is Etruscan is one of the least studied languages in philology. There's only a few like Etruscan scholars around. Mercury, the god, was adopted from Etruscan into Roman culture and became a very important god of intelligence, wisdom, philology, scholarship. Mercurius is an Etruscan deity originally. So I go into all this, and there are links to the Celts and the Druids. I explain it all in great detail. Their names for the gods, Tinia was the supreme god, equivalent to Greek Zeus or Roman Jupiter. Uni was the goddess of fertility, marriage, motherhood, love, similar to the Roman Juno. Minerva was the goddess of wisdom, like Minerva. She became Minerva in Roman pantheon. And Fufluns, I love this name, Fufluns. He was god of wine, vegetation, and happiness, equivalent to Dionysus. So these Etruscans were pleasure-loving, but not de trop, as we say in France. They were moderate pleasure lovers. Turnu, Eros, the son of Turan. Turan was the goddess of love, like Venus or Aphrodite. And Lassa were female spirits associated with love and fertility, like the Greek nymphs. So there were, we've lost all this. No one studies it. Very few. And we don't even really know where the Etruscan language came from. I've given all the possible hypotheses here. So what's the project? Okay. Well, it has to be something as complex and understudied as the Etruscan language. So it has to be religious mathematics. Because there is no such thing. It's like Etruscan. Nobody looks at this. But I've invented this discipline called religious mathematics. As a scholar of religious studies, I went for an interview to a job teaching in a school in Cambridge. And when I was there, I stayed in a hostel in town which had a copy of Newton's Principia Mathematica, which we've all heard about but never read. And this was an epochal book in the 18th century. And I read the last chapter that night before the interview. And I read with great interest that Newton says in the last chapter, he says, look, I've been studying and teaching, and I hope you've enjoyed reading my book about the mathematics of gravity and how the heavens work and how the laws of gravity can be understood mathematically, and why the moon doesn't just fall down on the earth. I've explained it all. But what I haven't explained is how it all happens and why. I've just given the maths. I don't know why or how it works. I don't even really know what gravity is. I've just explained it mathematically. And he says in the last line, he says, I think the answer to those questions would have something to do with God. If you define God as an eternally invisible spirit throughout all time and space, infinite extension. And then he says, but that will have to wait for another book. The mathematics of God. So anyway, I came along and I read this book and I thought, wow, has anyone done that? Because Newton died before he did it. And because I've studied religions for like decades, I thought I could actually do that book. And I know quite a bit about the history of mathematics. I chose not to become a mathematician, but I love maths, and I've used to be a member of the History of Maths Society and things, because it pops up in every culture. So I wrote this book, Philosophiae Religionis Principia Mathematica, which is an homage to Newton, which means the mathematical principles of religious philosophy. His was Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica. And I've just given it to the world. It's 3 volumes, and it lists 162 chapters for religious mathematics. Give me a number between 1 and 162.
Well, 82 is already used tonight, so
Yeah.
let's go for 115.
Right. Oh, that is from volume 3. Interesting, it's Truth and Religious Mathematics. And the chapter looks at all the truth claims of different religions, because obviously, and the words for truth, Dharma, Veritas, Aletheia. And it looks at what is truth in all these different religions, you know. Do they believe in an ultimate truth or just in an infinite number of particular truths? I mean, the truth is that book's on the table. That's a truth, right? And you could multiply things like that infinitely in this universe. But what about a higher order of truth, which would be like, when placed on a table, the laws of gravity mean that the books don't fly off. You know, you could mathematize it. So it's a detailed look at the mathematics behind truth claims in different religions. And I had great fun writing it. And, you know, in Christian theology, there's been wars between whether you believe in this version of the Trinity or that version. If you don't follow the Orthodox version of the Trinity, you get burned. If you don't follow the Catholic version, you get burned. Or if you don't follow the Anglican one or the Protestant one. So there's been infinite wars fought over the truth of which version of the Trinity you should follow. So in my chapter, I try and calculate how many people have died in the history of religions, just say in Christianity, for battles over what the truth is. You know, in Gaza, there's a war going on for the truth. The Israeli Defense Force, the Zionist cabinet of Netanyahu, the war cabinet, believe it is the truth that they have to destroy every last Hamas person. And if you question that truth, you're chucked out of the government and you're called a traitor to the state of Israel. Conversely, if you're a Palestinian and you're a member of Hamas, you believe the truth that Israel is an aggressive nation, it's a colonial power, it doesn't belong there. You have a duty of resistance, you know, and et cetera, et cetera. So here we have competing truths. How many people have died in that battleground of truths? It's in the thousands, tens of thousands.
Maybe that can explain global heating, global warming. Everybody being burned.
I appreciate the black humour. It doesn't help. Global warming isn't helped by all these wars. You know, so that's another chapter, is environmental, you know, and the religious mathematics of ecology and so on. But anyway, that gives a glimpse of the work. And what the project is to get this more generally going on in mathematical departments. I'd like to see some mathematicians helping this work. I can't do this alone. I've written the book, I've done the chapters, which consist mostly of questions. So to give you a few more chapters, cycles and religious mathematics. Like I said about the secular, every religion has a cyclical view of history. But the mathematics is different, say between the Hindu or the Etruscan or the Buddhist, or the Jewish or the Christian. And the mathematics of when the Messiah's coming never quite correlates. Or when the Maitreya's coming in Buddhism. I've asked different Buddhist lamas, when's the Maitreya coming? We need him. And they've all got different answers. Or when's Kalki coming, which is the Hindu next avatar of Vishnu? They all have different answers. So the mathematics of cycles is very important. Then I've talked about the cell and religious mathematics, as in the organic cell that makes life, plants, humans. The mathematics of the cell are incredibly complicated. Millions and millions of working parts, all working to make just one cell, let alone a whole body of them. Brain cells, eye cells, tongue cells, lung cells, they all have their own differentiations. And mathematically, they're incredibly complicated. And so I go into that. In each chapter, you get a thought experiment, like a meditation voyage, where you go on like a sort of out-of-body journey. Someone's supposed to read it to you as you lie on a massage table and go into a trance, right? And in this one, I remember writing this one, you go into a cell, like a tourist. You visualize becoming really, really, really tiny, and you go into a cell, and you can see everything what's happening, like a tourist. What the implications for religion are. Where did all this come from? Who organised all these working parts? Why do they all fit together to create it so that we can have a philosophy club?
How did that happen?
How did it happen? When? Is there a divine intelligence behind all this? If so, how do we know? What would it look like? And if not, well then how did it happen? So those are all the types of questions in that chapter. And the cell was discovered by Leeuwenhoek, a Dutch scientist in the 1700s who got hold of a telescope, 1600s, for the first time, was able to look in detail. And then Robert Hooke, who was Secretary of the Royal Society in London, saw what Leeuwenhoek was doing, made a telescope, repeated the experiments, and saw the first cells in British history, and was absolutely blown away. He looked at tissue and saw how incredibly tiny and complex they all were. And I think he coined the word cell to describe these things. Looked at plants and stuff. So I go into all that. Anyway, it's a fascinating work, 162 chapters. And, but I'm proposing in the project that we create this new discipline, religious mathematics, and that we get departments of mathematicians working on it together. And Islamic mathematics I talk about, Hindu mathematics, Christian mathematics, Chinese, I talk about the runes, Norse understanding, Druidry and mathematics, and Zoroastrian views. So, it's interesting, final thought here, that the word mathematics simply means learning. In ancient Greek, a mathematiki was a student, and a mathematician is a learned person. It didn't mean someone that does numbers only. And the disciples of Jesus were called mathematiki in the Gospels. So he used to talk to his mathematicians because it meant simply learning. So let's do some proper learning. And of course there's a chapter on peace and religious mathematics. There's a chapter on runes, religious mathematics. There's a chapter on words, languages, spells and mantras and religious mathematics. So anyway, it's all there. Yes. So look, that's fascinating. Right, let's do our periodic table one next. Do you want to choose one?
102.
You've chosen already, have you?
Yeah.
Okay. 102. Gosh, you're ahead of the game here. Santo Daime. This is a Latin American tradition of new religious movements. And it's part of NRM, what we call new religious movements, meaning it's a new religion that's been around. And often these are amalgams of old religions that are then put together in a new form. Santo Daime was founded by Raimundo Ireneu Serra, known as Maestra Irenu, meaning peace, in about the 1930s in Brazil. And it's only got about 75,000 followers, but that's quite a lot. Brazil is a real flourishing amalgam of spiritual currents. Spiritualism is quite important. The indigenous American, Indian, Brazilian cultures are still living. Lots of African people went to Brazil, and of course the Portuguese. And he synthesized, he sort of integrated all this. It's a form of spiritualism, really. He wrote many sacred hymns that are used in ceremonies. And it argues that truth is always new. Religions will never die. Spirit is eternal. Prayer and meditation are very important, but also study and wisdom. And they use the sacred medicine of ayahuasca to affect higher consciousness. So if you go to a Santo Daime church, you'll be invited once a month to attend an ayahuasca ceremony. And they've got official permission from the Brazilian government for this. I've never done ayahuasca, but I know people who have, and it's pretty mind-blowing. It seems to transport people into an altered state. The active ingredient is something called DMT, which totally transforms your perception, and you essentially leave your body and go on an out-of-body journey. Not always pleasant. It confronts you with your shadow, so if you're I've seen films, in documentaries that have been filmed of people doing an ayahuasca ceremony, and what they're doing is flying in the chief executives from American corporations to go and do the ayahuasca ceremony, and it breaks them down into realizing that what they've been doing is maybe not ethically very good, and their soul is exposed. Psychedelic means revealing of the psyche or the soul. Psyche is the word for soul in Greek. And when you come face to face with your maker, you have to give an account. So it's like literally a near-death experience. This happens to us all after death, and it's thought DMT is released at the moment of death, but this is happening, it's like a pre-death experience. Depending on how you are, you get that kind of experience. So, but these people know how to navigate all that. And once you've done that ayahuasca trip, you come out different. Your ethics are changed. You don't do persecuting, torture, killing. They are friendly to the folk elements of Brazilian religion and also to Roman Catholicism. Many of the practitioners of Santo Daime are Roman Catholic Brazilians because they, like Christ, they believe he was a navigator of these spiritual worlds. They've also borrowed from Allan Kardec, a French spiritualist in Paris, who was founder of spiritualism here in France, and he was like Robert Owen was in Britain, who was a strong spiritualist in Britain and an early socialist. Allan Kardec was a scientist who saw absolute evidence for the survival of the soul after death. He went to mediums in Paris in the 19th century, and he met the emperor at the time, and he published loads of books which became a big thing in Brazil. They still like Allan Kardec's work, who believed, by the way, he was a reincarnated druid called Kardec from Brittany. I suspend judgment, maybe he was. But they certainly love him in Brazil. And in this Santo Daime tradition, his is one of the texts they study still. And they believe that, there's one universal spirituality which all these traditions, which we could say from all the table, are embodiments. So yes, Brazil is an amazing place, I think, full of syncretistic currents and teachings. So that's the Santo Daime tradition, alive and well and flourishing. Any questions? Have you been to Brazil? Haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you meet any spiritual practitioners there?
No, but they got on good spirits.
You got on well with them? Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, I've been in various places. It's a beautiful country.
I'd love to go. I've not yet made it.
It was a beautiful country. That was about 40, 50 years ago. So.
I think it's still beautiful. Latin America is an amazing, huge continent. I hope to go one day. So that's that one. Okay, let me do my one. Well, we've had those ones. Let's do, yes. Let's do the new religious movement of eclectic goddess worship, 109, in honour of my daughter. Because I think she came from that tradition.
This is. I have to break in here because that was actually the number I was going to do.
You were going to do 109?
That's what I planned.
Ah.
And it came out as 102. And it's amazing that it comes up for you.
Ah. Well, that's the one I saw that attracted me. I thought, let's do 109. So this is an interesting one because I've been very influenced by the kind of feminist spiritual movement. I remember coming back from Canada to London in the 80s and discovering a bookshop called Atlantis, which had all these amazing goddess books, and I discovered a thing called the Fellowship of Isis, and went to Ireland, met the founders in a castle and joined it, and it hit me like a lightning bolt that we've lost our goddesses from religions, from Judaism, Christianity and Islam. They've sort of gone underground, and we have God, but what about the goddess? So that started me on a journey, and to me the goddess is wisdom, Sophia, or the Shekinah. I discovered she is there in all the traditions, and I think I'm not alone in having gone on that journey, because I discovered some eclectic thinkers like Monica Saju who wrote a book about the goddess, which I have, and my daughter had. My daughter found her way to the goddess traditions independently of me, and she was part of circles in Brighton and Britain that were doing goddess ceremonies, hence this full moon thing they do. I think what we loosely call the hippie movement found their way to the goddess. A lot of these people were influenced by Jung, who also was a kind of goddess discoverer, who felt that the lost feminine wisdom needed to be not forgotten. Theodore Roszak was another influence. And the more I researched it, the more I discovered that, look, it's in all these traditions, this goddess teaching. And if you look at Theosophy, for instance, Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey, I mean, they were realizing you can't ignore the feminine side of God, the goddess. Even Nietzsche, when he announced God is dead, actually what he forgot to say, but the goddess is alive. He didn't get the second bit. And I had a phone call today with my youngest daughter, Shanti Grace, who's in Switzerland, visiting a famous part of Switzerland, climbing mountains, Muren it's called. And I pointed out that Nietzsche went to Switzerland a lot, and he wrote some of his greatest works in Sils Maria, which is a village up in the mountains there. And I said, pop in if it's near you. So that tradition, which then came to Hermann Hesse, and of the goddess of wisdom is important. It was also there in Goethe, in the German Romantics, who discovered the feminine side of God, if you want. It was there in Schelling and the Romantic poets, Schiller, who wrote the Ode to Joy, which is the hymn of Europe, great poem. And I think Robert Graves, as a poet, when he wrote The White Goddess, a book that meant a lot to me as a young poet, he argued that poets have known this all along. It's like an open secret to poets that the goddess is real, takes many forms, and in the Celtic Druid world she's called Ceridwen, and all bards and poets and druids had to swear an oath of allegiance to Ceridwen, and still do. So his book, The White Goddess, put this into the public imagination. I remember my mother had a copy which I devoured as a teenager, and said, yes, I want to be a poet. It was the beginning of my realisation, my awakening, if you want. And I would put the Beatles in this lineage, Jack Kerouac, Bob Dylan, who took a Welsh name, as in Dylan, Terence McKenna. Musically, groups like the Grateful Dead were taking this forward, and also Fraser Clark, who I met, Stephen Gaskin, and a famous feminist scholar called Merlin Stone, who wrote a book about the goddess traditions at the time of the biblical culture, called When God Was a Woman. So the eclectic goddess traditions, it's very interesting. It's a new religious movement, but I would say it's very, very ancient. The most ancient on the planet, probably, because our ancestors revered the feminine. We all come from the mother. They thought of God as the great mother. The male god is a sort of appendage that is there and important and not to be scoffed at, but not to dominate or control the feminine, but to work in a partnership. And if you go to the Lascaux Caves, not far from here in the Dordogne, it's a goddess temple. The whole thing is shaped like a vagina, which we've just discovered is an Etruscan word. And it's covered in these paintings, which are an homage to the feminine, the goddess of ancient prehistoric mankind. And then Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco saw the rebirth of all this. And also Crete, and the goddess of Crete is important. And she's there at the heart of Greek philosophy. So Plato, the Athenian mysteries of Alephsis, worshipped the goddess Demeter, Athena.